Welcome to Goal Getter, the AAP Physiotherapy podcast. My name is Jen Panteluk, and I'm the CEO of the Alberta Association of Physiotherapy. This show explores the power of physiotherapy, helping individuals move, heal, and thrive. Let's get moving. I'm really excited to welcome our guest today, Nicholas Bennett. We're going to have a great conversation around the importance of physiotherapy, both for prehabilitation and rehabilitation. And more importantly, we're going to get to know Nicholas and hear about his pathway to the Paralympic Games. Nicholas, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So as an athlete, our listeners might be curious, what is your diagnosis?
Well, I was diagnosed with ASD, or more commonly known as autism spectrum disorder, at 3. So with my diagnosis, when I was younger, it more so affected my ability to speak, but also more so affected the way that my body moves. So, like, the brain-body connection wasn't really there compared to a neurotypical child. So a lot of the time, my movements, I could not even walk until I was about 4. That's how affected I was.
So lots of different treatment and a lot of work to probably be done along the way to get you to where you're at today.
Yeah, a lot of physiotherapy and lots of different ways. Well, a lot of time spent in the water even before I became a competitive swimmer was just making sure, like, we could bridge that brain body gap a lot more, and making sure, like, also gain that social aspect out of sport was also a big thing, just because that would be the biggest thing. Even if I didn't become an athlete after all this therapy, it would just be a good way to get that community connection as well.
How does ASD affect your life personally as an athlete?
Yeah, for different I do a little things different. Like, I probably won't hit as high as the mileage as other people, just because since ASD is neurological, I find that after a certain point, it's just not. Well, me and my coach found that it's just not as effective to hit mileage hard, just because after a certain point, my technique just starts to drop a little bit harder than other people, just because, like, I find that I well, I usually get a little bit more sore than other people, just because, like, I think, like, my with the brain body gap is, like, I overcompensate with, like, telling my body what it's feeling, or my brain tells my body it's feeling. So, like, I think, like, I'll probably be hurting a lot sooner than other people, just because how my condition affects me.
Okay, so you mentioned that sometimes you might need to stop or you don't put in the same amount of mileage as other athletes because your body maybe breaks down a little bit earlier, you get sore a little bit earlier. How important is like the prehabilitation and rehabilitation for your swimming to make sure that your body is staying healthy and strong to keep you in the pool day in and day out?
Well, it's probably the most important thing I do outside the water, just because, like, I find I do burn out quicker than other people, just because, like, I think my body, with my condition, just tells me it's done, and then I kind of just have to listen to it. After I do reach a point, just it's not effective to train after it. So I do physiotherapy a lot more than other people, just because I do need it. If I don't, it's kind of like cutting with a dull knife. It's just ineffective, and it makes a mess of everything.
That's fair, and you wanna be sharp when you're, leading up to a major competition. Do you find that physiotherapy helps with muscle coordination, flexibility, or any other movement patterns?
Swimming is a big thing about technique and all that stuff. So, like, if I am reaching the limit of what I can do in the week, and I need to hit, like, a physiotherapy, like, like, yesterday I even did it, and I was seeing the results of it. Like, I was swimming in the morning, I felt terrible. I had, like, a deep tissue massage booked a couple hours afterwards. Did that, then came back in the afternoon, I was doing better than I have been all leading up to well, the past week. So like even doing it, well, even a couple after hours afterwards, I was seeing results. So like, it was I do find it's necessary for me just to hit what we're supposed to do.
Would love to hear a little bit about your journey into swimming. How did you get started into the sport?
So what got me into swimming was I used to do water therapy, and for my getting that brain body connection for my therapy. And my sister started out swimming as well, so that was kind of like the gateway. So we saw how it worked for her. So my parents decided to put me in swimming at the age of 7, and that kind of just snowballed from there.
Did you start competitive swimming at 7?
Well, I'd say I joined a swim club at 7. I didn't really get competitive till later, of course, but
Yeah.
it was a long road until with that.
What was one of the things that really drew you into the sport and wanting to continue further into it as you progressed?
Well, the friendships I built around like the community was a lot nicer than most some of the other sports I did. It was well, nowadays all my friends are like ex swimmers, still swimming, all that stuff. So like it's just the community that around it that kept me in it.
Yeah, I think community is so important when you're involved with any level of sport and finding that niche that you really fit in and like an environment where you can thrive. So what does a typical training day look like for you? Off season and then when you're leading up to a major competition?
Usually I'm training like maybe 3 to 4 hours a day, which doesn't sound a lot, but after when you're doing about 10 to 14 kilometers a day in the water, you start feeling it by the end of the week. It's just a lot of like aerobic work, and we're just trying to make sure like our body gets destroyed, so when we reach that point in a race we get used to it.
I know that feeling all too well. Do you do any other types of sports to like cross train your body, or is it really just a focus on swimming for you?
During like a typical train year, we usually hit the gym for strength training and all that stuff. But my coach, who is also my sister, really likes cross trains. So, like we'll do like maybe yoga for like just stretching and making sure we get build some more strength outside the pool. But lately we decided to do Pilates. Funny enough, just so like swimming hits all the muscles, then
Mhm.
that's a good way to reinforce outside the water.
Do you find that having your sister as a coach, she pushes you harder than maybe someone else would as a coach?
Well, she's definitely doesn't take no for an answer when I'm tired. I know that more. She'll definitely like it when say like I'm actually done like mentally. She'll just put another load on. It sounds mean, but it's definitely what I need because like I know what she has my best intentions in her choices. So some days we go back and forth about it, but it's what's needed.
Well, I think that mental toughness is so important as an athlete, right? Like sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you really just need to be able to push through mentally. And I think to be able to do that in a competition, you also need to be able to do that when you're leading up to and in your everyday training as well.
Well, especially for swimming, to be honest, you're not really doing that much besides moving. There, you can't really focus on anything besides like a little black line on the bottom. So like, it's
Yeah.
just finding a way to keep yourself in the sport, and also just knowing that this is what's best for you in that moment.
Let's talk a little bit about the journey to the Paralympic Games for you. What was the deciding moment where you knew this is something that you wanted to go after?
Well, as soon as I got classified as a pair athlete in swimming, that kind of just like was well, people started talking about it like, oh, you have the chance of becoming do something really good for your sport. You got a chance to hit the big leagues just because like I got classified at 14, which is around like the typical age people get classified. So like and it was about 2 years before Tokyo, and you know how that stuff happened. So it kind of like leading. up until like, started for Tokyo, did kind of okay there, and then 4 years later hit Paris. Why? I just imagine like I I'm a completely new person at this point. I'm an adult, and I really need to actually throw down and make something happen for my career. So that's kind of like where I really decide like want to do this.
What was it like in Paris at the Paralympic Games?
Well, I'd say the culture, in the village was amazing. Just, having all these different, countries and all these different people together really created a unique experience that I don't think people will ever experience if they're not there. But it was just, I'd say, great, to say the least. The village was beautiful. The venues were, well, all of them were quite amazing for the Paralympics, but it's just been, I'd say it was an experience I'll never forget.
And how does it feel to represent Canada on the international stage?
I'm pretty proud just to wear this little maple leaf all the time, but reaching that point is already an amazing thing. But being able to wear the maple leaf and then show Canada you're one of the best athletes in the world, I'm having a hard time describing it, to be honest. It's amazing.
Sure, a little bit overwhelming as well.
But yeah, there were a lot of emotions around that. Well, a lot of tears also. So
I can only imagine. Can you walk us through the events that you were involved with or involved in Paris and just how you felt going into each one?
So I did about 4 races in Paris: the 200 free, 100 breast, 200 IM, and 100 back. I think for my first race, I was a little, jumpy and stressed just because, that's always kind of what happens on the international stage before you actually compete. But first race got silver in, so it was pretty successful right off the get go. To be honest, I wasn't really expecting to do as well as I did because I won Canada's first gold medal at Paris with my 100 breast. That race was, well, I'd say stressful for everybody else since I touched fourth at the first 50-meter mark. So I don't think people were really expecting me to touch first at the end. So that kind of just got the ball going until the 200 IM, which I broke the Paralympic record in and got first. And then it kind of just, that was kind of like the highlight.
How did it feel when you touched at the end of those races and looked up at the clock and realized I just won the Paralympics in this specific event?
The 100 breast was completely unexpected, to be honest, because I was going in fourth. I didn't actually get ahead of everybody until the last 5 meters of a race, which isn't really what happens usually. So if people did watch that race at the end, they saw me completely elated, but also shocked at the point. So it was just, well, amazing that racing the best athletes in the world, then coming out on top. It was just amazing.
Silver, a gold, and then not only a gold medal, but a Paralympic record. Like, how did that feel?
Well, the Paralympic record was, well, to be honest, it was a little expected because I hold the world record in that event that I broke it in. But
Mhm.
the thing with international competitions, it's quite stressful. So like competing domestically, I find that I'm a little bit quicker just because it's a little bit less stressful and you have a lot more things you can control compared to like the Paralympics where you don't know if your bus is going to be late or if you don't know that what your competition is going to bring out. Breaking that record in front of like 10,000 people was amazing, but the perfectionist in me has a couple things to say about that record.
Always room for improvement, right? How has competing at the Paralympics changed you as an athlete and a person?
The first time I competed in the Paralympics, I was 17 in Tokyo. I found that, to be honest, I wasn't completely. Well, funny enough, that was my that was my first senior team as an athlete. I was the youngest Canadian in Tokyo. for the Paralympics. So like I found that, to be honest, I was not mentally ready. That I wasn't well, I wasn't fully mature enough at that point, like training wise and all that stuff. I was training hard as I can, but like I don't think I was doing the right thing outside the pool and all that stuff. Just because I didn't do terribly, I made all the finals in my heat. I ranked fifth in one of my races, so that was the highest placement. But I think I realized I needed to pull up my socks afterwards for like everything. Like I needed to take care of myself outside the pool, inside the water. But for Paris, how that changed me, I find that is just like this, it really reinforced what I was doing was correct, and it really, well, vindicated what moving like, across the country again was the right thing to do and find the right area to train in.
Right. And I imagine you also probably just you saw your progress. You I mean almost grew up in the pool and realized what other aspects you needed to bring in to up your level of competition at that international stage.
Yeah.
Any advice that you would give to aspiring Paralympians?
To really take care of themselves. You know, as a Paralympian, they're depending on, or as a parent athlete, depending on their disability and all that stuff, like injury could very well, in fact, just end their career more than like an able-bodied athlete, just depending on what they injure and all that stuff. Since like it's just so important to take care of yourself and also listen to what your body says.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's number one for any level of athlete, whether you're a weekend warrior or a high level elite athlete. In terms of the mental aspect, you said that that was like a really big challenge. Did you have any specific strategies or did you do anything in particular to help to train that mental side of the competition? I know for myself personally, when I first got into triathlon, for me, it was when I started to really focus in on mental training that I transitioned as an athlete. And I think it really helped to accelerate how I raced and just like how I showed up to a race. Did you like, is there anything in particular that you really dove into or dug into in terms of that mental aspect?
Nowadays, for swimming, we have an actual like psychiatrist on the team at all times, just to make sure like everybody's mentally sound. But for like what I do for my personal thing is like I realize like I get really stressed if I'm not doing good in practice. Like I think leading a couple of weeks out before we went to Paris, like I was not doing the best. So like I was I don't really show people this, but like I was actually like almost hyperventilating because like need to be on top of my game. So like it was just this. I had to calm down, you know, like breathing exercises, all that
Mhm.
stuff, and like having to realize that I don't have to be the best right now. It's like you just have to show up the day of the race and be the best you can be at that point. It's just
Right.
trying to calm down the back of your or the voice in the back of your head that says you're not good enough at that point.
Right. Yeah. And that voice sometimes gets a little bit too loud, and you just got to find strategies to quiet it down a little bit. You're talking about how you were feeling really dull leading up, just heavy load of training, really high intensity. Can we talk a little bit about, did physiotherapy play an important role in leading up to and during like any of your training and competition preparation?
Physiotherapy is like a big part of my recovery strategy for my train loads. Just you know, like when you use a knife too many times, you have to resharpen it. It's kind of like the same thing. Like some days, like well, funny enough, I did just get an RMT appointment yesterday just to fix a couple spots I made that weren't really doing so hot. And like I already, well, I had practice basically just like hour after, and I was already feeling 110% better than I was, well, before. So like that the way that well, you know, as an athlete with like a neurological condition, also like I think with my, well, I get bogged down quite a bit until I start, well, having like a physiotherapy RMT appointment with all that stuff, just because I find that my brain body connection gets interrupted by, you know, my muscles getting gummed up. So like I start becoming a little bit more dull. I'll keep using that word.
You just talked about having an appointment and then it really helped. You could feel it right away in your practice. Are there any specific exercises or treatments that you like are your go-to to help prevent injuries or help you sharpen kind of your body as you're training?
Deep tissue massages are my thing usually. They hurt. They really hurt. Yeah, but they work. So, but for like outside of the water, like treatments, all that stuff, I just try what the person I'm seeing recommends. Usually, it changes person to person, but I try to incorporate all their the collective knowledge of everybody in that regard.
Well, I think there's some really great knowledge out there to help with recovery. You've been swimming for a number of years now, and I'm sure maybe you've had your share of injuries or you've seen a lot of, your peers become injured with swimming. What are some of the more common injuries or physical issues that swimmers face, and how do you manage them?
Knock on wood, I've never had a serious injury just because my coaches have always taken precautions just to make sure I don't reach that point. But now, well, back in the day, that wasn't really a focus for people. So when I first started swimming, we would hear about people getting like rotator cuff injuries or their shoulder just blew out. A lot of the commons like the shoulder issues, pec issues, even rotator cuffs are a big thing in swimming. So once that's go, everything stops. But what a lot of people don't realize is like how strenuous is on your legs. Like for I do a lot of breaststrokes, so a lot of the times like my knees will be absolutely aching, and you gotta take care of that just in case you don't want to blow your knee. It's just a lot of just precautionary work in reaching that point. Like I have a certain mileage load that I'm supposed to hit each week, but if we go past it at any point, my coach makes sure that I don't do anything too intense afterwards, just so I don't reach a point that's dangerous.
Right. It's kind of constantly monitoring your body and how it's feeling. Do you ever find that there are weeks where, there's a certain load that you're aiming to hit, but things aren't kind of feeling right and you maybe look to reduce that load a little bit just in terms of being proactive? Or do you find you push through and try to figure out other ways to make sure your body doesn't break down?
Like some days in the water that don't feel as good as others. So like we'll might depending on how I'm looking and or how like I am feeling, we might drop the load by like a kilometer or something just to make sure like I'm not like we're not doing anything dangerous, especially since I have like a neurological condition, some things might not be as apparent to me. So like if I might be doing something wrong with my technique and that's like what's causing it. But it's also like with so also have epilepsy, so that's a great combination of that. So like sometimes my body kind of just tells me to just quit it, and we'll listen to what it says so we don't have any issues in the water.
You know your body better than anyone else. So I think listening to it is so vitally important especially when you are doing that high volume of training. So earlier you had shared that like physiotherapy was a really important part of recovery for you. And we know that, not only training takes a toll on your body, but competition can take a really big toll on your body as well. Can you share a bit about what you do to recover after an intense competition? For example, like after Paris, what were some of the strategies that you did to help recover?
After Paris, I took a couple. Well, funny enough, I did take the rest of the year off. That finished in September. Got back in the water in January. So it wasn't as typical to what I do, but what usually do. So after our selection meet, I'd say back in May, we it's a long competition. So usually during that they have RMTs on the sidelines, making sure everybody's actually getting or that are in tip top shapes. Like they'll have massages on the side, making sure people have physiotherapy on the side, especially since a lot of those high level athletes are a little bit more prone to injuries after in those competitions since they're pushing themselves so hard. So it's just a lot of like also making sure you get that mental rest. Like I'll after like a big competition, I'll take like a day off just to sit down and I don't know, I'll read a book or something just to take my mind off the sport.
You said that you have, in terms of cross train, one of the big things that you do is strength training, which I think everyone should make sure they're incorporating in their everyday or in their weekly routines. Are there any specific mobility or strength exercises that you feel have made a really big difference in your swimming performance?
Now it's a hard one. uh, well, a lot of the stuff that we do is, well, in the gym that I do is a lot more leg focused, just to take the strain off like the shoulders. So like I will load up something with squats just so like how we push off the walls and all that stuff. We can get that explosive feel. A lot of the time,
Mhm.
it's just finding ways like also like to build strength for forearms and all that stuff is people don't really know, but like forearm strength it really takes off the load for like takes the strain off the shoulder in swimming. So a lot of the time I'll be doing like I'll be holding weights for like minutes long time just to strengthen that little those little muscles down along here just to make sure like well for breaststroke a lot of the time you grab the water like this with your forearms so you don't really put a lot of strain here so you take off that strain using the forearms so it's just trying ways to strengthen the weaker muscles so you can put the strain off the important a little more delicate muscles.
And protect those muscles too, because they're really vital and super important to make sure that you're staying strong for your competition. So I'm sure there's lots of people and lots of young aspiring athletes who really look up to you and the journey that you've taken. Do you have any specific advice that you'd give to younger aspiring swimmers about injury prevention or taking care of their bodies early on to make sure that they have longevity in the sport?
Is just to listen to your body. When it tells you it's done, don't push yourself. Because I've seen so many well, when I first joined my club in Alberta, 80% of the kids had shoulder injuries, back injuries, just because their previous coach really pushed that you you go until you drop. There's time for that,
Mhm.
but you just need to make sure it's not every time just because oh my dear I'm 21 years old. I've never had like a serious shoulder injury, so it's just making sure you're not doing 110% every time.
Like, do you think that the combination of your strength training and really focusing in on like the prehabilitation and rehabilitation has helped to prevent you from having any serious injuries, especially in the shoulders? I think that's one of the most common ones I hear with swimmers as well.
Yeah, it's well with that like I've been in sports so long that like not having injury is well not really heard of just because after a certain point when you get older you're more likely just to have that since you have so much mileage on it but it just because like when I was like young I my parents really wanted to make sure I wasn't pushing myself to the point that I actually break with that but also they found they they really pushed forward for hitting that rehabilitation just because well my sister was a swimmer before me. She blew out her shoulder I think at 16 and she that basically ended her career. Pushing yourself until you break isn't really what you're supposed to do but also
Mhm.
well they realized that you'd have to strengthen your body in the gym just because back in the day that wasn't really a thing. You just push yourself in the water and see what happened but
Right.
also after what happened they went on a rehabilitation cycle with my sister and they realized that that preventive work could just avoid all this fuss if they just did it right now.
Right. Yeah. And like to your point, prevention, huge, like such an important piece of like longevity for an athlete. How do you personally balance your training intensity with recovery to avoid burnout or even an overuse injury?
Usually, I like using like a 25% rule. So like if I train for 4 hours a day, I'll do 25% recovery outside the water. So like I'll stretch for an hour, or I'll be doing like yoga for an hour just to make sure like I don't burn out.
Do you ever have days where your alarm goes off and you just don't want to get into the pool?
Uh, there are some mornings when I wake up at 5 that I'm very tempted just to shut off the alarm and close my eyes, but that's not what elite athletes do. At least that's what my sister tells me. So
So on those days, what motivates you to get out of bed? The wrath of
it,
your sister?
they're after my sister, but also I know that my people I'm racing internationally are doing the same thing, so I should definitely be trying to keep up. So it's it's just I have to. It's kind of willing myself to do it.
When it comes to swimming, what do you think is often overlooked about when it comes to how do you incorporate physiotherapy and rehab and recovery? I know you've touched on a lot of like what you personally do, but do you find there are athletes who kind of brush it off and, oh, I'm not going to get injured. I don't need to worry about doing this? Or do you find that people are pretty diligent?
I find that a lot of younger athletes or in our sport do that, but after like a certain point, it you kind of have to. And I think after you hit like the national stage, you realize that it's so important just to hit it. But that wasn't a really big push until like 6 years ago, and I think a lot of the younger athletes still have shoulder issues, but it's definitely dropped in the past a little bit. So it's also like a shift in sport in general, I find.
Yeah, just that focus on how do we keep bodies active and how do we prevent injuries from happening.
Mm.
I think also just nowadays, I find youth definitely seem to specialize a lot sooner than say, I don't know, I think back to when I was a kid and I just played all of the sports and you're constantly like the seasons of the year were or like the sports seasons where now kids really do specialize a lot earlier on, which I think if you're not doing the right preventative and looking after your body, I think you've alluded to that a couple of times, you're going to have injuries early on that could really cannibalize your career or, you know, make you exit a sport a lot sooner.
Yeah, the science behind it has definitely become even more refined in the past like 5 years alone. Like when I first joined like the high performance center in Montreal for swimming, the amount of information I learned just joining, but then the years afterwards that it got more refined is just insane. Like even like diets in sport have like really got become a lot more specialized for like per athlete, but it's also with how they treat treatment in those circles has definitely become a little bit less, well, I'd not say like stigmatized, but like it's just like you're actually taking care of yourself, because like I think it's always been like like you want to be the best, so you just train yourself till you basically drop.
And sometimes that has unintended consequences when you're not looking after the body as a whole. So you've had a really wonderful career to date. You're only 21. What's up next for you?
I'm looking at LA, but before that, it's just, refine what makes everything work and making sure I still love the sport day to day. That's basically what's keeping me here.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, for coming on the podcast today. This has been a wonderful journey learning more about your road to the Paralympic Games and also just, the importance of physiotherapy to keep you sharp out of the pool and ready for that next international competition. So I personally wish you all the best on the journey ahead, and I will be watching and seeing, how you do both here locally and on the international stage.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's great talking.
Thanks so much for joining us today. We had a great conversation with Nicholas, learning a little bit more about his journey to the Paralympic Games. If you're interested in learning more about physiotherapy or finding a physiotherapist near you, visit albertaphysio.com. See you next time.